is actually what a project is. I think the key area which you need to understand from the project is from the perspective that a project will always have a starting point and an end point. That's the first mandated thing a project should have. A project cannot be something which does not have an end date, and it could be anything. A project could be, it's always a temporary thing which is basically undertaken to do certain action which will actually give you a service, result, or a benefit. So if I talk about training, so, Venus, you mentioned, or, Takita mentioned that she wants to do a certification. So you can say that doing the certification is uh, doing the certification is the project for her. So she has a starting point, that is that I want to do the certification, and once this she does the certification, that will be the end point of that project. In between, you will have your plan and design, the execution stage, the monitoring and controlling stage before you move to the end. So in this case, if I take the example of a BA certification, the initiation point could be the idea or the thought of starting a certification. The planning and design would be looking for the training programs, looking for the mock test, sample questionnaire, studying from a book, from an example, and executing would be writing the actual exam, and then monitoring to see that and controlling that you pass the exam or not, and if you have to repeat any of the things. And once you do the certification, that would actually move the project to the end stage, and that would be the task or the objective complete. Uh, from the perspective, if we talk about the jargons which is generally used in the IT industry, any project, anything which starts, should would actually have one of the two things. It will either be a problem statement, as an existing scenario which is causing delays or causing certain has a negative detrimental behavior within the process. So that would be a problem statement for which you will handle a project, or there will be an area of opportunity. It could be an untapped market which a company has not ever thought about going into and now thinking of venturing into. So these would be typically two things. Either you will have a problem statement, or will be an area of opportunity for you to grow somewhere for which you will start the project. Any questions, guys, on the definition of project? As again, if you have any questions and any doubts, please feel free to stop me in between and ask those questions. And as I said, that this is be more interesting and more knowledgeable if we interact with each other. So I would really love if you can share your experiences, or if you agree with what I'm saying, or if you don't agree with what I'm saying. If you would want to add something to what I've said, uh, that would be really great. Okay. Anyone with any of the ideas or thoughts on this, on the project? Everybody is clear about the project? I'm going to give 5 seconds for people to speak up in case they want. I'll wait for 5 seconds. No? No questions? Alright, moving on then. So as you're discussing, there could be multiple reasons for the project initiation. It could be for the growth and the survival of the organization. It could be, when I talk about growth and survival, it could be, as I mentioned, that there's an untapped market which the organization has not ventured into, and they would want to go into a particular field or particular area, particular type of market. Uh, Classic example is car industries and the manufacturing industries. Or if we talk about from the IT service industry perspective as well, it could be that they start at a one place. So a company starts their production and their outputs in, let's say, in US, and as they grow, there could be a project initiated for them to sell their product in, let's say, UK. So from the time they thought of growing the organization from selling their products only in the US to in the UK, what are the steps which are required? What are the legal formalities would be required? What they all need to do? Do they need to open a manufacturing unit in the UK? Can they do it? Do they have licenses? Can they produce here and ship it out to UK and sell it? Can they just sell it online and then ship it to the customers? Everything which is included and encompassed inside that area would be a project, and a person would be responsible for that project to deliver as is requested. So it is basically growth and survival of the organization. And as I mentioned, everything and any reason you can think of a project starting would be reaching up. If you trace it back, when we do the traceability of a need or why the project is there, there has to be a business need, and a business need or a business justification for a project will only come if there is a area of opportunity to grow or if there's a problem statement. So your existing system, something is not working right, and hence to fix that you're starting a project, right? The second point which it mentions the all projects are aimed to help the project sponsor. So if if there is nothing which is good coming out of project, then probably it's very you will also understand then there's no point in having that project. So project will have a result without the result, and the result has to be the beneficial for the person who's starting the project or for the organization who's starting the project. Uh, I'm sorry, guys, to stop. Sanjay still can't hear me. Is everybody okay, or anybody else is also facing that problem?
Okay.
Feedback, please. Okay, so I've got from Venus. If you can hear me, all right. So Sanjay, probably you will need to. Let me just ping him that he will need to just bear with me for a minute, guys. I'm sorry about this. Just ping him. Sorry, guys. Something wrong with the mic. Somebody else. Um, just 2 more minutes, guys. Sorry. Sorry about that. All right. Okay, Sanjay can hear me now. He has refreshed the screen. All right, guys. Okay. So as I was saying, a project has to have a result which is beneficial, because if it is not beneficial, then what's the whole point of doing the project? So when we talk about a project, as I said, it has to have a need, and the need has to have a outcome which will benefit you in certain ways. So when we talk about doing a BA certification, or we talk about doing a BA training program, the the end result is beneficial for the participant, right? So once you go through the training program, the reason and the benefits are either the certifications or a better job, or if you're looking for a getting into a particular type of industry, a particular type of role, so that would be the end output. Um, and the third point, projects may be initiated in response to a business strategy. This is again in a higher level roles up to the 2 points which we have discussed. It could be to cater market demand, tackle competition, increase market share. If you read through these, they will always talk about two things, either the area of opportunity or a problem statement. Okay. Any questions, guys, on the project initiation front? Anybody would like to share their any experiences on the project, or anybody who has worked in project which was at the initiated when they were there? Because most of the time it will happen when you join a project, it might be in the execution phase or analysis phase or planning phase. Any experiences somebody would like to share on the initiation front? No. Okay. So moving to the next point is basically what is the difference between an operations and a project. So we talked about, anybody would want to tell me what would be the difference between operations and project. I've intentionally gone back to the screen because I don't want you guys to be reading it. Anybody want to take a stab at it? Just 1 or 2 points. Come on, we've got 10 participants. Nobody wants to have a go at it.
This is Taquita. I think
like along the point that you had earlier with the project, there's a start and an end to the project, and it is for a specific reason to do with, as outlined on the slide before, efficiencies or, in standing up a new vertical in a market space, whereas with the operations, it's the day-to-day activity that sustains the company, and that's an ongoing activity opposed to a project where you're implementing it and you have time frames, and within that time frame, you have an objective to be able to deploy and to get out, and to then, of course, have those impact the operations of the organization.
Perfectly said, Taki. That's I think very very nicely defined the difference between operations. You're very right. Project has a start date and an end date, and operations is the basically organization's day-to-day activity. So I think you have summarized the differences to the core and to the exact point. I will still go to the screen. So as Tikita mentioned, operations are organization functions performing the ongoing activities. It could be the financial activity, keeping up the books, manufacturing activities like producing goods, which the organization does. These are all operations projects, or I would say projects operations, which a company does or organization does on a day-to-day basis to survive, to generate revenue, or to produce the goods or the results or the services they offer to the market. Whereas projects are temporary, they are specifically created to achieve a set of goals. And as I said, uh, a business case has a business need, and a business need is basically because there's a need or there's a goal where an organization wants to reach, and hence the project has been initiated. So a project will always be basically a temporary nature. It will always have a separate management. So if you talk about and if you look at the industry per se, you will have a management at operations level as well. So it's not saying that operations will not be managed by a senior management level. They would be, but their kind of management is more of people oriented and the production oriented or the services oriented. What is the day-to-day activities they're performing? Whereas when you're talking about projects requiring project management, this is basically managing the change, what has been initiated. They won't be managing the day-to-day activities. They will be just managing the change which has been initiated through that project. And once that is complete, the management will cease to exist. There won't be any more project manager. Simple reason being, there won't be any more project. Once the goal is achieved, the project ceases to exist and the management ceases to exist. And as a third point, unlike the ongoing nature of operations, projects are always temporary. Now, at times you might find it that the temporary nature of these projects might run for 4 years, 6 years, and even 10 years. I have been giving a personal example. I have worked in a project for 4 years, which started 1 year before I joined and kept on going till 2 years after I left. So overall, 7 years of that project life cycle I know, because the amount of changes among the application which was being implemented. And this I'm talking about one of the one of the huge banks. We were implementing a core banking system. So you can imagine the changes that would need. It's not a small 6 months or 1 year project. It went for 6 to 7 years before they can actually started using the whole functionality of the application. And I know about projects which have ran for 7 to 10 years. They keep building on functionality on top of what they have delivered. So these are long-term projects. They are done in the phase-wise approach. So you will say that your temporary goal within the whole program, you can say, would be to deliver a certain set of functionality in the first year. So you can say year one functionality 1 to 5 is my project one, and then project two is year two functionality 6 to 10, and this whole thing, the whole span of set of projects could become a program, right? Am I clear? Any questions on that project and program front? Should I take another example? All right, I'm taking everybody's understood the operations and project different. Okay, right. Moving on to the next slide. happen. Uh, so when we talked about project initiation, we talked about difference between operations and a project. So when we talk about project, a project needs to have a project manager. We're talking about the management which is required for managing the whole project. So the person who is whole and sole responsible for the project is known as the project manager. Now you'll be thinking this is a BA training. Why we're talking about project manager? We will come to the differences and the similarities, the kind of roles a project manager and a business analyst play in the successful delivery of the project. Uh, but yes, it's important to discuss because even today, there are a lot of organizations where there is a lot of confusion as to draw a clear line as to where BA ends and the project manager starts. So, and I've seen a lot of people playing both BA and project manager role for the small scale project. So we'll talk about what exactly is the role of a project manager and what exactly is the role of a business analyst. So from looking at the end-to-end perspective, we will say a project manager is the person who is responsible for the delivery of the project, right? So whatever comes within that, talk about resources, talk about time, talk about budget, talk about quality. Everything is project manager's responsibility. Okay. Project manager also plays a very, very important role in coordinating with the customers and the management. So when I talk about customers and management, don't think from the perspective of the end user as a customer and the management as being a line manager. It would be any of the stakeholders we have. So it could be if I'm a project manager, it could be my immediate boss, uh, who could be one of my stakeholders. One stakeholder would be the person for whom we are doing this project. So when we're talking about operations and project difference, we talked about operations as a day-to-day activity. And if I take an example, um, let me quickly think of an example. Okay, let's take an example of a banking system, right? So years and years ago and decades ago, the banking did not have IT, so you would still have those physical books which will be maintained for all the accounts and for all the funds which are moving from account into. And so we talk about, so that would be a day-to-day operations job. Somebody who is a bank teller sitting at the behind the counter, taking in the request for deposit and taking the request for withdrawal of money. So that is on day-to-day operations job. When talk about a project could be bringing in the IT system for helping them to maintain the records online so they can, have a connectivity within the branches. They all know what's the exact balance of a account holder from any of the branches, right? So that I'm taking that example. So in this case, a project manager would have a stakeholder for the one or for the operations team they're actually doing this project for, right? Uh, so that is one. Project manager's stakeholder would be the person who would actually do this job. So if the IT team, if I talk about the actual developers, I would talk about the testing team, they all are also stakeholders. So for a project manager, it is very important to be in touch with and communicate with anybody and everybody who is involved in that project. It could be a direct one, it could be an indirect one, but a project manager needs to know anything and everything that happens with the project for one simple reason, that this project is project manager's whole sole responsibility to be delivered. Any questions, guys? Anything anybody would like to add, agree, disagree? Any experience anybody would like to share? Somebody who has worked as a project manager and a business analyst? No? One of the key requirements for a business analyst is to basically be involved and talk to a lot of stakeholders to get the requirements. Anybody? Everybody's okay with the project manager then? Tunde, everybody has understood the role of project manager. Okay. Moving to the next slide. So anybody, I've explained what is a project manager. I know we have some seasoned business analysts. We also have some fresh out of college people. But who do you think? I've gone back to the slide intentionally. What do you think is who do you think is a business analyst, and how would you define a business analyst role? Come on, somebody has to tell me that now. Nobody?
Yeah, I would like
Yeah,
to define.
yeah, Vinesh, please go on.
Yeah, analyst basically acts as a translator between or a medium between the customer or user and IT person
Okay.
who are attempting to meet the user's need.
Hmm.
Or basically, a business analyst is someone who analyzes an organization or business domain and documents all the business processes. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much there, yes. Anybody else would like to add anything? Right. So I've got Wendy saying liaison. Yes, Wendy, that's also right. So basically, business analyst, if you talk about, from the role perspective, is basically a set of tasks which you carry on for the life of the project, and in different stages of the project, based on the different techniques which your organization or you can use or whatever is available in the market, different techniques to do different set of tasks to understand why this is required. So when we talked about a business case or a business need, for a project to have enough material, why this is required, analysis is required. So this is a person who would be actually analyzing, and as Venus mentioned, that somebody who would read through the documentation, go through the existing system to understand what is the areas or the problematic areas or the opportunity areas where we can do a project to make something better. And as I said, that there has to be an output for a project, and the output has to be something which will benefit you. It shouldn't be that if something is taking 5 seconds for something to process, you come up with the project will start taking 10 seconds and basically slowing down the whole process, right? So you won't be doing that project. So the person who comes up with the solution, who comes up with the idea, who comes up with the all the analysis which is required around it is the business analyst. Okay. We talked about just bear with me 1 second, guys. So we talked about solutions which would be created either for the problem or for the area of opportunity. The solution often could be an organization change, it could be people change, it could be hiring new resources, training existing resources. It could be based on the infrastructure area, like getting a new building, buying new systems, buying new machinery. It could be upgradation of the system. So you basically, for example, if you're using Windows 97, 98, we use a newer version, so that is again a solution to a problem or to basically an area of opportunity for you to grow. Or it could be a process improvement. So these would be your key areas where you'll be working on a project, right? So your solutions would be around these areas. Is everybody okay with the business analyst definition? Any questions, guys? Okay, going to the next slide. All right. So, a role of a business analyst, what Venus mentioned, and I saw Wendy send on a text message as well. A business analyst is basically a liaison among the stakeholders. Uh, so, basic work or basic idea of a business analyst is to basically manage the stakeholders you have. And when we say stakeholders, the definition of stakeholder is very simple. Anybody who has a stake in that project. When we say stake, the person is basically affected directly or indirectly with the project, would be a stakeholder because they have some interest in that project, and the success and failure of the project would determine whether determine or would have some impact on their day-to-day activities or on their operations front. So it would be when I say a business analyst liaison, so as with the stakeholder, a business analyst discuss to get and elicit requirements, analyze the existing system, validate the requirements with the stakeholder, understanding, basically confirming that the understanding of the business analyst on the current situation is right and as per the stakeholder, and to understand organization-wide policies and behaviors as well. So a lot of people have asked me, come back and ask me this question, that as a business analyst, why do we have or why do we need uh, you know, understanding of the organization policies? Anybody would like to answer that question? So if I ask this question, do you think as a business analyst you need to understand organization behavior or organization structure or the organization policies. Do you think as a business analyst you should do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think it is necessary to understand the business. Yeah.
Any specific reason why you think it's necessary? Can you give a small example or just a brief description of that?
Yeah, because when we are finding out the solutions, first of all, we should be aware of the business infrastructure and the business needs.
Hmm.
And suppose in case of we making a business case, there we need to find out certain parameters. So until unless we are aware of the business strategies, policies, we cannot work on that. So I think we should need to have a full understanding of the process
Hmm.
or on what the team is working on,
Perfectly
how
said.
the business works. Yeah.
Perfectly said, Ines. And you know you've hit the nail on the head. So it is very important for the BA to understand, and you need to keep in mind, as a business analyst, and I always tell people that you need to understand and keep one thing in mind: the goal. Why are you doing all these activities for? And it's very important to understand that what you're doing this for is going to help the organization or the area in which you're working. Now if you look at the huge organization, and if you talk about the business process, let's just say manufacturing of a car, from day one to the delivery of the car, it's a big and a long process, right? So you cannot have a project running at the end to end of a business process. You might be running a project in, let's just say, engine department. So you want to improve the efficiency of engine department, you're running the project only in that area. But it's very important for the business analyst to understand the whole organization structure, because you need to understand what is the upstream system and the downstream system as well. So what are you getting from the other departments, what you're giving to the other department, because you might come up with a solution which might not fit in the puzzle. And if you don't see that bigger picture, and if you don't look at the whole organization wide, uh, the map, then there's no point in building a solution which will not work. So all the effort has gone waste, and the solution might work in a silo in that particular area, but in overall end-to-end picture, it does not fit. So everything has gone to waste. So it's very important for the business analyst to know the organization policies, organization structure, how things work in an organization. It's very very important. I'll give you a very small example. I take a lot of examples from non-IT side as well, and this is a very good example. So one of my friends used to work for a manufacturing industry, and you won't believe what happened was they planned of buying a machinery which would increase the production time, because they were eyeing a very big order which is supposed to come in 6 months. They figured out everything from the finances, from getting a loan to buy the machinery, to how it will be installed, to people who already have experience in running this machinery, but they forgot to check the size, and it took them, and they didn't had the you measure the size, but they didn't had, and they didn't had a business analyst to understand it's just not about keeping a machine needs a running space as well, the space around them as well. And nobody did that business analyst job for them to understand how it will be placed, how it will work, the other departments from the manufacturing industry, how would that relate. In the end, they had to put a machinery which was far from the next department the processed product had to go to, which meant the time actually increased for them to produce the result. So all that money, all that effort gone to waste. Okay. The other points are the business analyst understands the business problem. Why? Because the person who is the business analyst will be analyzing every aspect of the problem. So if you are working as a business analyst, as I mentioned, that you have to keep your eye always on the price. That is the goal, and that is the objective of the project. You would know why are we doing this. So you are the person who understand the problem and the opportunity area for which we are doing it to the core. Okay? And the business analyst is responsible for ensuring the project outputs meet the requirement. This is again because a business analyst was the person who was actually gathering the requirements from the stakeholder. So, and as people mentioned that, business analyst is a liaison within stakeholders. And in the IT space, we have always said that the developer, the testing team are also the stakeholders. So what you, as a business analyst, what you get from the stakeholders, the way you elicit the requirements, the way you document the requirements has to move to different departments for the processing. So you need to make sure what you get from what you get from the stakeholders are the requirements meet the business needs. Okay. When we talk about the documentation now from the business analyst perspective, we'll talk. I remember one statement that was made to me when I started as a business analyst, and one of my mentors told me that if your sentence can be interpreted in two ways, it's a wrong statement. So you need to be very careful as a business analyst. Excuse me. You have to be very careful as a business analyst what you write, how you write it, because the way you write the requirements, if it can be interpreted in a wrong way, the next department or the developer or any other the follow on the downstream area could actually build or do something which is not beneficial for the project. Okay. Any questions, guys? All right. I'll move on to the next slide then. So we talked about Tikita talked about certification. So one of the certification is from International Institute of Business Science, which is CBAP. Uh, IIBA also has produced something called Business Analyst Body of Knowledge, also popularly commonly known as BABOK. So if you look at the diagram on your screen, this is what a BABOK the way BABOK has described what is the key knowledge area of a business analyst and how it works. So first of all, one question, this probably is not related to BA, but does anybody know why it is called as business analyst body of knowledge? It's the same thing for PM also. So if you look at PMI's PMP certification, the book is called PMBOK, PMBOK. It is called body of knowledge. Anybody knows why it is known as body of knowledge? No? It's called body of knowledge because it's not written by a one particular person. So IIBA as a community, as a business analyst community, has come up with a book which is being created with inputs from model authors, and it gets reviewed by multiple people. It's going to come up, version 3.0 has come up, and there are going to be new few changes to that as well, and I'm part of few things which we provided our inputs. As certified business analyst, you get an opportunity to be part of creating of these sort of BABOKs. So since it is created by a community, that's the reason it is known as body of knowledge. All right. So coming back to the diagram, just give me a second. So if you look at how BABOK has defined a business analyst area, they have divided the key skill set and the key task we perform into 6 knowledge areas. So the 6 knowledge areas are elicitation, enterprise analysis, solution assessment and validation, requirement analysis, requirements management and communication, business analysis and planning and monitoring. To perform these 6 activities, what you need is the underlying competencies, which is nothing but your different techniques which you need to perform certain set of activity. So if I ask you to find, if I say there's a problem, my internet is not working. So there's a problem statement within your organization, and as a business analyst, you're asked, so your underlying competency, how would you do the root cause analysis? Would you use fishbone diagram? Would you use 5 whys technique? So all these are different techniques which you use to perform a particular set of activity. Also, what is important to understand here, and I would like to mention, and people who have BA experience would know, you would see a lot of arrows going out and coming in. And the reason is that IIBA clearly mentions that there is no follow on, it's not a sequential process. It's not that you will do requirement gathering and then you will do requirement analysis. After analysis, you might find that your elicitation or the requirement gathering was not complete, so you might go back to elicitation as well, right? Business analyst planning and monitoring is sitting on top on all these activities because whatever you do, you need to plan and monitor the activities are as per the requirement or not. Okay. We will not go too much detail into how IIB has defined these knowledge areas, but yes, we will cover areas of these in our for further sessions which we'll do. So we'll cover elicitation, we'll cover requirement analysis and all the areas. Any questions on this? Takita, any questions you have from the perspective of certification here? Are you aware of BABOK or the certification?
Yes, I am familiar with this. I don't have any present questions. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. You talked about the CBAP. I'm looking forward to write that exam.
Uh-huh.
So will you be able to provide us the material to study?
I will have to check with the training coordinator. So this material or this content training program is more of covering overall business analyst. So as such, there is no separate content. So if you think from the BA perspective, and I can give you, if in case you have any specific questions, I can email the answers to you on a separate note for the interest of time for others. But you have to go through BABOK, you have to get registered, so you get a copy of BABOK. And if you read BABOK, BABOK is going to talk about the 6 knowledge areas with the underlying competencies as they defined. So they will talk about elicitation, what is elicitation, how you do it, what are the kind of activities you need to perform, the results of the elicitation activity forms the input for another activity, how does that flow, and when do you have to come back, when do you have to go forward, what is traceability. So we will cover all of that anyways in our further sessions, and all the, we have, we will talk about all these sections, and all the sessions will be covering at the end. So it will cover those areas. So I think that should help. I'm not clearly sure if that is what you're looking for, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I was actually asking, is there a particular book or material which I should study before writing an exam?
So you
Uh,
have to read BABOK, and BABOK you get as soon as you become a member. So you have to either buy the copy of BABOK because it's copyrighted material. You get your own BABOK as in your name. So when I became a member, and it's always good enough to become a member because the pricing is, you can write the exam without becoming IIBA member, but the pricing with becoming a member is the same. So as soon as you become
okay.
a member, you get a free copy of BABOK, which is basically certified for your, let's say, your personal copy. You should not be sharing with others. So in my copy, then it says, this is licensed to Vineeth. So every page has
Anyone
that.
can become a member?
Sorry,
Anyone can become a member?
anybody can become a member. Yes, you're
Okay.
right.
Wow.
And you have to study BABOK. All the exam questions on CBAP or CCBA are from BABOK and nothing from outside. Okay.
Is there any multiple choice questions book
There,
where the exam must be multiple choice questions, right?
yes, it's MCQ based questions. Yes.
Is there any book for that separately?
You can find a lot of material online. There are a lot of websites which give the question bank for free. There are some who charge. But personally speaking, from my experience, if you go to the BABOK and you get the understanding what they're trying to say, then it's basically you'll have a, it's easy to clear the exam if you understand what they're trying to map the business analyst activities to which knowledge area and how. So when I say elicitation, they would actually explain how elicitation works, what is the input for the activity, when do you perform the activity, how you perform the activity, and when the activity is performed, how the output moves to a other department. I've got a question from Wendy. Wendy, this is for the IIBA. So before you had joined, there are people who were looking for the certification from the business analyst perspective. We talked about PMI's PBA certification, and there's another certification from IIBA, which is CBAP and CCBA certification. So the membership, the question which you asked about member on, this is for the IIBA. Once you become the member, you get the BA Body of Knowledge book. Currently it's on version 2.0, sorry, version 3.0. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Right. Any questions? Any other questions, guys? Okay. Right. So moving to the next screen, if you see more about business analysts, you don't have to worry about these links. Uh, once you have, at the end of the session, the training coordinator will be sharing some details with you. So you will have the presentation and the content from there. So you will have these links. So you don't have to worry about writing. But these are just a few videos, which is like skill sets for a business analyst. What does a business analyst do in a software project? The other areas on the certification. So the third link is on the certification. This is only from the IIBA perspective, if you see. But there are multiple other certifications. So as we mentioned, there's PMI, PBA, then there is CPRE, which is only on the requirements engineering front. So based on what is your interest is in, you can actually pick the certification. PMIs, PBA and IIBA's CBAP is basically talks about overall end-to-end business analyst certification perspective, with IIBA's CBAP being one of the oldest. PMI started only last year. IIBA has been there for more than a decade now. Okay. Uh, just bear with me for a second. I've got certain questions in chat. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. Any questions, guys? Okay. Just bear with me for 5 more seconds. Okay. Uh, if anybody has questions on training and related training, I would suggest that we wait for the end of the session. I'm going to share the details of the training coordinator who will be more than happy to answer any questions you have from the training perspective, as on the cost, the duration. I know Ranjit is asking the question, so uh, I will share the details of the training coordinator, and you can speak to the person if you have any specific question related to the kind of trainings we do and any related to that. If you have any
So do
questions,
you teach any domains?
this training program, Ranjit, is only for business analyst perspective. It's not any domain specific training. I'm not
But
sure
to
if my
become,
yes, please go on.
sorry, go ahead.
No,
No, see, I have seen some job descriptions where they
mhm,
say, as BA, you should have some domain knowledge.
mhm.
So at least if you don't have domain knowledge, looks like, most of the job descriptions are requiring domain knowledge. But so is it not covered as part of this training?
So Ranjit, it's something which is a debatable topic. If you look at and if you read through IIBA's BABOK, and if you look at the background, a lot of companies do look for business analysts who have domain knowledge. They're basically looking for two people in one. Okay. And but if you I have seen that example, I have worked in those organizations where they look for domain specialization with the business analyst role, but sooner or later organizations started understanding that these are two different roles. So one is called as a domain SME and one is called as a business analyst. Now if you take my example, I'll take my example. In this case, I have worked in financial industry, I have worked in banking industry, I have worked in telecom industry, and I have worked in production industry and as a business analyst, because they are organizations who have clearly understood that BA is a separate skill set. You don't need, yes, having a domain knowledge helps. It's a good to have, but it's not must have. And a lot of organizations have understood that. And yes, you're right. In a lot of job descriptions, you would have seen people asking for a particular set of domain and the industry experience. But then there are the organizations who are looking for sort of two roles in one. Yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah.
can you just like, tell us what percentage of jobs would not really require any BA domain specific information?
So I cannot give you
Are
a
there many
percentage.
jobs? Because most of the jobs are asking for domain.
So when you talk about domain, even if you look at the job description, I think you will see it's not that they're looking for experts in that area. So let's just say if I talk about a business analyst in a banking domain, to be very honest, when I joined as a business analyst in one of the projects which was doing core banking system, I had absolutely zero knowledge of core banking systems. I knew how account works because I had my current and savings account, but apart from that, I had zero knowledge on that. So, the organization which will actually give you training programs, you can actually brush up your knowledge areas on, this industrial experience or domain areas by reading certain books or, just reading, going to Google. So if you have basic knowledge, I think that should suffice for most of the organization. But yes, To answer your question, I cannot give you a percentage because it depends upon industry to industry, whether you're talking about IT, manufacturing, within IT, it's a service industry or it's a captive. Uh, if it's the area specific, if you talk about country specific, all this makes a huge difference. But as I
So,
mentioned, but as I mentioned,
sorry, I just want to ask, will you be covering any domain in this program
this
or not?
this training program does not cover any domain. This talks only about business analysts. The training program which I'm taking is only talk about business analysts.
Okay. And just one other question. Also, BAs, are they required to have any technical knowledge? Because, for example, there are some job requirements where they say, like you should understand ETL concepts or SQL programming, or you should be able to write SQL queries. So, will you
Again,
cover that?
again, it depends. We will cover a brief on that. We'll cover probably might cover a skill, but you need to understand that when we talked about, and if you look at the initial slides, when we're talking about what a business analyst does, as part of analysis, you have to understand the existing systems. So if you look at from the job description perspective, when they're saying BA should be able to write SQL queries, is basically to understand the existing table structure. So if you understand the current problem, or as is, if we say, only then you will be able to move to a to be state or a future state. So all this helps. Again, going back to my example, I can write an SQL code very easily today, but there was a time I could not. But then when I needed something, I had experts who were writing it, and you learn through with your experience that you can start writing your SQL queries yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I missed the starting part of it. I don't know if you covered any tools that you'll uh, go over in this training. Do you know what tools you'll be covering, if any?
So when you talk about tools, which tools you're looking for? Is there any specific tool you're looking for?
Like, will you cover requisite rational tools, requisite pro,
So we
or
won't cover,
any?
see, okay, so when I talk about business analysts, and this is for everybody in the audience today, when we're talking about business analyst training, we're talking about the concepts. So when you talk about Requisite Pro is a tool which is used to manage requirements. Now I can do the same thing using SharePoint. I can do the same thing using ShareDrive. It'll be a little challenging using ShareDrive. Requisite Pro is more of a simplified version of that, having a configuration management. But then we will be talking about the concepts, not the tools. You can use, not every organization uses a Requisite Pro. I worked with 7 different organizations earlier, and only one uses Requisite Pro because it's very, very expensive. The other people have other ways of managing. You will see people using requirement gathering tool, and most of the organizations you see using Excel, right? So there are various tools available, but all the tools do the same thing, as in managing the requirements. So if you're looking for that, we will be covering that concept. Because if I talk about tools, for one activity, there are 5 different tools. It's absolutely not possible for us to cover all the 5 tools. We will look at Visio about flowchart diagrams and everything, but then again, it's a flowchart, or a process flow diagram, which is more of a discussion and talking point rather than the tool, because you can do the same thing in PowerPoint as well.
So you're saying you can do the diagrams in Visio as part of, like, let's say, for example, UML diagrams.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to discuss that in the
We will,
Visio
we
in the
will,
class?
we will discuss UML. Yes, we'll talk about your use cases and everything. Yes. But
Okay.
they will be in a future session, and I can always add them. See, you need to understand what you're trying to understand, what you're trying to gain out of the course. So if you're looking at specific tool, that is not something which we're going to cover here. We're going to cover first of all the concept. So if I talk about, when you talk about saying UML, uh, you have star UML, you have a UML template within Visio which you can use. So there are 2 different tools already you have. And if you look at PowerPoint Smart graphic art application or the section of it, you can create a lot of flowcharts in there as well. So there's no stopping you from creating what a star human can do within Visio or within PowerPoint. If the output is how it needs to be, use any tool. Yeah,
Yeah,
this
that's
is
true. But see, conceptually, that is true. Sorry, but conceptually, whatever you said is true. But if you really look at the job requirement, because I have been looking at job requirement to consider this BA a career path,
mhm.
and they are specifically out of, I can probably say most of the jobs anywhere in this country in the United States, majority of them are asking for a specific tool related experience. The people should have worked on these tools, or people should have had the domain knowledge or domain. They may not be the subject matter expert like you said, but at least you should have basic domain knowledge or understanding, or it's more from a practical sense. So more than the concept, I think that is what companies are looking for, and that's why for a fresher like me, it would become a little bit challenge, right? That's what I'm looking to see if I can get that information from a training program.
So this is something which I actually do it at the end. But these are the sessions. If you would have got that email on the training program, there would have been link which says what we will be covering. So these are the sessions which we'll be covering. These are the topics we will be covering. And
Also, CBAP, I think your course seems to be, I saw this slide also. I think it seems to be geared a little bit towards the CBAP certification.
no, it's
But
not. So it's not like that.
company,
We have used one of the slides to talk about what is a diagram from CBAP, and that's the reason I was mentioning on that slide only, because see, for us you need to understand that we get different kind of participants. So if I talk about today's audience, I have people who have 7 years plus of years of experience who's looking for certification. I have people who are fresh out of college and looking at BA as a career model and have a professional experience. So if you think from the training perspective, we have wealth of experience, range of areas, right? So the training program, and that's the reason when we start, we always ask for what is the expectation of the course. So I know Takita is looking for certification. So the areas which talk around that, I will put some stress on it. So if I had 5 people who had zero knowledge of experience, I will not talk about CBAP certification, because you need to have at least 5 years of BA experience to talk about, even think of applying for CBAP certification. So don't go only by the slides, and that's the reason why instructor is important here in the training programs. We look from the perspective of the audience, what is the expectation of the course, and we talk about it. So it's not driven from the CBA perspective, it is from a BA perspective. Yes, I spoke about it because there is a participant who wants to know about it. And
yeah,
similarly,
because I don't
you would
think really, companies, yeah, go ahead, sorry,
yeah,
go
I'm
ahead.
just saying that you will appreciate that, me taking time out and talking about your specific points, though others might not have those questions. So we will go a little bit here and there, because just to meet everybody's expectations. I think that's fair enough to do.
Do you cover all the testing concepts also along with this
Testing
testing
concepts
and
will
some
cover.
project management?
We will cover this. Project manager I've already covered at a higher level, but testing concepts will cover. That's the reason I'm saying the email which you would have got, and this is for everybody, all the everybody in the audience today. The email which you got from the training perspective, there would have been a link which will actually take you to the PDF which is there on the screen right now, which talks about what all we will be covering.
So after this training, can we apply as a fresher and still get a job?
Yes, a lot of people have.
Or or should we put some experience in the resume?
Sorry, I didn't get that. What's your question? Sorry.
So see, some people suggest that you should add experience in the resume and then only you can get picked, because most of the jobs are asking people to have experience, right? It's really very hard
All
to
right.
get a job without
Okay.
any.
So see, I'm not, and this is not something which I would suggest, and I'm totally against fake experience and putting things which are in your CV which is not true. And this is a public forum, and I stick by my word on that. But I will tell you one thing. In my more than 10 years of BA experience, and I've taken a lot of sessions. Trust me, and I have seen. I'll tell this to everybody that even if you are not in IT, even if you are not worked anywhere, there are two roles you have always have played in your life. One is a business analyst, and second is a project manager. And that is the reason why I was talking on those two slides. If somebody would want to talk about where the BA ends and the project manager starts, and the thin line between the two roles. Even if you go buy a car, you have done two activities. You have done a business analyst role, and you have played a project manager role. Okay, so when we talk about building your CV, if you look at one of the sessions will be building your CV, helping you build your CV, and doing mock interviews. And this is where probably we can help you how to build a CV. There would be certain activities you would have performed, which I can clearly say this is a business analyst activity, but it's just that you probably were not aware before the training program that yes, that activity is a business analyst activity. If you ask anybody, and this is one question probably I forgot to ask, but if I ask this question, do you think a business analyst is restricted only to IT? Anybody would like to answer? Is business analyst only in IT? Yes or no?
No, because
No.
currently I work with medical, and medical
Exactly.
have the business analyst.
Exactly. So
Yeah, healthcare. Yeah.
I have had participants who have worked in manufacturing domain. I, for one, started working in a manufacturing domain. And if I go and ask in a manufacturing domain, people who produce goods, and I say that do you have a business analyst and is there a role? Half of the people would not know, and they would be doing a business analyst role. So if I look at their CV, they will talk about business analyst experience in the manufacturing perspective or in the words of manufacturing role. Yeah. So this is where you need to understand what is a BA, what is a role a BA plays, how do you see that, and I'm sure, I'm 110% sure if you have worked, if you have around 3 to 4 years of experience, there would be certain BA activities which you would have performed. There's absolutely no way that you would have not done it.
I
Anybody
have a couple of
see?
questions.
Yes, please.
Yeah, my first question to you is, as I got the email, they said that they're going to ensure that candidates are prepared for CCB and CBAP certifications.
Hmm.
So is it just the training help, or is it separately you're gonna provide some more help for the certification?
So I, for one, actually, I stick with my candidates and my students for quite some time. So till the time you need any help, you're more than free to email me. If you have any questions, you need any help in understanding how the application process is, how it needs to be filled, what are the key
Yeah.
points to keep in mind, because filling the application form is one of the biggest hurdle in the filling of the or sorry, doing the certification. So I, for one, I'm always available, and I have already mentored close to 15 people in CBAP certification across globe, and this is only for my last year.
Thank you,
It's
because I'm actually looking and I'm really interested to get certified in that. But what my wants will be, first of all, I want to know the good book to read after this training, and some practice book which could be available online, so that I can practice multiple choice question before going for the exam. So
definitely.
these are the things which I'm looking for.
See, I
And
talk
just in
about
case I have a
I
question, I'll email you.
yeah, definitely, and see that's again the point. And I know what Ranjit was asking about this training program is only for CBAP certified people or for the certification. It is not. So, and one of the reasons why we ask, what is the expectation of the course is so that I know what I need to cover on certain areas. So I might not be able to go too much in depth from only from the certification perspective, though I know Takita is there, you are there who is interested, but then we have other people, we have, who are attending the session who are not looking in only from the certification perspective. So we will try to have a sort of a balance between the two. And if you have any specific question, please feel free any day, anytime. I will share the email address on you, which you can get in touch with me. My SLA, which I've kept for myself, is 24 hours. So you will hear from me in 24 hours. And if I'm really busy and if your questions are detailed and I need to prepare something for it, I will email and will let you know for that as well.
And the book you suggest is BABOK, right?
That's the holy Bible for the certification. If you don't read that, you
Yeah.
will not be able to clear the exam.
Yeah, so please share your email ID just in case I have any question in future.
I will
And
share the contact details from the email address, from the phone numbers, everything at the end of the session.
all right, and one more question
Yeah.
I have is, so I understand that having a domain knowledge is not necessary,
Mm-hmm.
because we need to understand how to be a good BA first.
Mm-hmm.
So, but my question is, I have an IT background, and will it help? Will it help in putting up my resume?
Yes, definitely. So if you're looking for I'll tell you the majority of business analysts who there are 2 3 ways of becoming a BA, right? So if you take from the experiences I have seen and how industry has worked is earlier people there was no BA freshers. It would not be that his first job day one and you're a business analyst. What happened was when the organization started seeing projects failing, I can give you examples from leading IT companies, okay, and these are not small names, and I have been in a couple of projects myself. When the project started failing, they started doing the root cause analysis to understand what was the reason, and the reason came out because there was no specific role defined who would be looking only at the requirements. So earlier, it was a part-time job done by a senior person in the project who would be either a developer or a tester or a project manager for that matter, who would be doing the
Right.
requirement gathering as well, and who would be doing other activity as well. So
Yeah.
since when they decided that it is because requirements are not being defined correctly because the person is doing something else, what they did was they made developers and testers who had the knowledge of the system, like you stop doing development or testing activity, only concentrate on the requirement. This is how BA started. Okay, to a level where they realize that domain is not something which is important. I will talk about behavioral characteristics of a BA, talking to people, communication, how to, manage different and difficult stakeholders. So this became one of the key activities and the key role and the key performance output, or you can say, which was required from the BAs. So they started realizing that you don't need somebody with detailed domain knowledge, somebody who can understand the jargons, who understand the basic terminologies of the business can actually do this job. And that was the time when people, started getting hired as a fresher BA. So they would work with a senior business analyst, but a junior or a starter BA started happening. So this is how a BA role has come up. So if you have IT experience, and as Ranjit was asking, if you have SQL experience, that helps. So if you have IT experience, you already understand the SDLC, the software development lifecycle. We will talk about that as well. But you
Yeah.
already are
Yeah.
aware of it. You're already aware of agile methodologies. You know how it
Right.
works. So you mentioned you had Hyperion, certification as well. So
Yeah.
if I talk about
Yeah.
financial system which uses Hyperion as a tool to pull out reports, and there is a project which is required in Hyperion. Just imagine that you'll be the key, you know, become a key project or sorry, key business analyst in that project, right? Or in fact,
Hmm.
even if you don't want to use Hyperion, you have already understand the business of financial area, so you can actually become a business analyst in that.
I already have educational certification in data lakes for big data. Can I also add that in my resume?
Definitely.
Because
Why not?
can I be a business analyst for big data, or can I explore such kind of roles so that I have that? I like this big data thing because this is upcoming, and I want to somehow use that in my resume,
Yeah.
like
So
make my knowledge what I know.
yeah. So as I mentioned to Ranjit also that business analyst is a set of role. We when you talk about tools are the ways of performing certain techniques or tasks, right? So tools can change. So you have big data today, you will have, I don't know, something else in the future, something, how the
Yeah.
coding changed. So you had C++, then C hash, then Java, and then, different types of code. The technology moved on. But if you look at the coding concepts, if you talk about OOPS concept, and if you talk about data encapsulation, that remained the same, no matter which language you were picking, right? So it's same thing with
Right.
business analyst. So you want to be part of big data? Definitely, why not? There's no stopping you. You can add that in your CV. Somebody who is working in big data would also be needing a business analyst. So
Yeah.
if I look at if I'm a project manager, if I have a huge project, I need looking for 4 business analysts, and this is for everybody again. This is how genuine at a huge project level works. So if you're working in a team of business analysts, what project managers do, and this is something I used to manage a team of 10 people, and this is how we will structure a team. I will have one very good business analyst. So the guy who would be, this person would be expert when it comes to business analyst concepts, requirement gathering, documentation, how to manage a team, how to manage the stakeholders. And if I work around, let's just say, for example, Hyperion or big data, I will have a business analyst who has the knowledge of that as well. So when these two
Yeah.
go to a stakeholder meeting, which we call as workshop sessions, I know that I'm covering both my fronts, right? And this is how
Right.
I started working for the complex project. And I also mentioned for small, medium-sized projects, you'll have a business analyst and a project manager as the same guy. That also works because if a project is going to be work like 3 weeks or a 4 week project, it doesn't make sense to have a whole army of roles employed for that 1 month project. But for complex project, this is how it works. So you can
Okay,
definitely
just
do
a
it, and
quick
that will help.
question, one more. And so about the domain thing. So suppose if we get a project in healthcare
Yes.
company, and for the second project, we can say that we have a domain knowledge of healthcare, right?
Yes, you can.
So there is nothing separate you need to do to get the domain or knowledge, like just having an experience in one domain in one company, and for the second company you can say that you have a domain knowledge of this help.
Definitely, and if people are interested, so when we do mock interviews, and I can cover that in mock interviews as well. So when I take interviews, that's a question I ask. So if I see somebody who has worked, say, in healthcare domain, I will probably ask which areas in healthcare domain you have worked in that organization. So you don't have to prove your worth in domain knowledge by certifications only. So I'm not saying
Right.
that if you're a healthcare domain specialist, then you need to go and get some certification from the healthcare board or something. So if you want to prove your banking, then go and get a banking license or a trading license to prove that you are a domain expert in trading. I'm not asking that. So in IT,
Yeah.
if you can prove that you understand the business and the way it works, that is good enough.
Okay. Thank you.
No, Manish? Right? Good talk. Any other questions, guys?
Yes, yes. One last question. So will you cover data modeling, data mapping, and other things?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you look at use case in unified modeling language, basic flow, use case diagrams, path and scenarios, class diagrams, sequence activity diagrams, we'll be covering those. And trust me, those
Is it
words
the
look
same as
huge.
data model?
Data model is again a type of modeling technique. So all these times you need to understand what is a model. When I talk about data modeling or a business flow diagram, they're all models. Models is a way to show how things work. So when I talk about uh, business flow, is showing business process. Okay, when I say data modeling, it will show me a model in which how data flows. A process can flow, a data can flow. And trust me, these are big names, big words, but when you get into it, they're very easy to understand. Or at least I'll make it very easy for you to understand.
What is the entry level BA salary according to your experience right now?
Um, I'm sorry, that's not something I would know. It depends a lot. Trust me. I can give you any number and that would be true. So a lot depends
No,
upon
but
your skill set.
general, based on your observation in the industry, what is entry level salary?
I suggest that you look at the job website, which will give you a basic idea. You can go through, this pay. There are a couple of websites which do this pay scale analysis. I think one is known as pay scale. So if you do that, you'll get the better idea. And in fact, when you do that, they will ask you a bunch of questions, and their bunches like 15, 20 questions to understand where you are. If you even keep putting pressure and everything as a entry level, they will still ask you a lot of questions. And the reason is because there's no fixed number you can come up with. Okay.
So is there like a range that we can look at? Like, is it like $40,000, $50,000 a year, or
I would suggest you do a pay scale because they will have to do the same. Don't have a number right now which I can give it to you. Sorry.
okay?
It's just a website. Just Google it, the business analyst salary, and you will first two links would be that actually. And you can put a specific area you're putting. They will actually give you area specific salaries as well. Area, country, region, division, organization type as well. So if it's an IT service industry, it's a captive industry, they'll give you range of salaries on all the fronts. Okay.
Okay. And what are the class days?
This will be Saturday, Sundays.
How many hours each session?
Uh, Close to 3 hours.
Okay.
It won't be more than three. So between 2 to 3 hours.
So will you give, I know you said you'll not give anything to do about the tools because you said the concept is important, but are there any practice activities in the class exercises where you'll give access to
We
some
will do
tools and
assignments. We will do assignments after
like
every session.
will we have some access to some tools, whatever tool it is?
Not the tools, but we'll do assignments based on the concepts. You can use any tool to complete those assignments.
Okay, so basically, I think you are going to be asking us to do it in a MS Word or a PowerPoint, right?
Yes.
Okay. How about any concepts? I didn't see anything about like IT infrastructure, ITIL, because that in some jobs they're also asking for ITIL
ITIL is a totally
knowledge.
different concept from business analyst.
So BAs don't require to know anything about ITIL?
Depends upon the role. So ITIL is a different concept, basically used in application support and maintenance area front.
Okay. See,
So
my only concern is from a job standpoint. I
mm,
understand that what you're saying is, I think, I don't know, I just have a feeling that maybe it's just geared towards the certification, CBAP to obtain certification. But according to me, I did not see too many jobs asking for CBAP certification. That don't seem to be a prerequisite to get a BA job. What the
um,
prerequisite mostly, if you apply,
I'm not
they're
sure.
asking for.
Indeed, I'm not sure where I've been looking, but I have been working
I'm
with
looking at dice.com. I
business
mean, if you look
business
at
analyst
dice.
for more than 10 years, and trust me, there are organizations who look for CWAP certified people and they're not getting any.
No, if you just do a general search in dice, don't I mean they're not really asking for CWAP. They are mostly asking for tools,
Do one thing.
experience, specific tools.
Do one thing. Just Google CWAP jobs. Just two words. CWAP jobs. If you want to
Hmm.
put a location, put a location. Don't go by a website. Just put CWAP jobs and see how many you get.
Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's fine. But I'm trying to understand that this course is the emphasis or the focus is mostly on the CWAP certification.
It's
What
not.
you're going to be teaching,
No.
right?
It's gonna be on business analyst. The competencies and the skill set for a business
So
analyst.
will it also help us become like business systems analyst, or is it different than what
It depends
you're
on.
teaching?
So it depends again. See, these are the words: system analyst, technical architect, business system analyst. These are the words. It depends upon how organization sees it. Okay, so when you talk about business system analysis, this is somewhere on the technical front. It's not a BA. But a lot of organizations do not have business system analysts. So they have a business analyst will be from the business analyst perspective. A technical guy who will be looking at only technical architecture will be called as a technical architect. So that person analyzes only the systems as a technical structure perspective, which application links where, how the data is flowing. Though business analyst will be using it, but the ownership will be with the technical architect.
So you're saying there is a separate person who do the technical business analysis and then the regular business analysis?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I maybe I didn't see that because companies are asking for all the
See,
combinations.
Ranjit, I'll be very honest. If you look at job descriptions, depending on the organization and probably from the interest of time and other participants, we can take this discussion offline probably after the session if you want to know in detail. But trust me when I say it depends upon organization to organization, and there are a lot of people here in the participant list who will agree with me. So, as I said, I have worked with organization where there is no role as a business system analyst, absolutely
Right,
no
right.
role.
See,
So,
again, that was the case 10 years ago. You might have, that I agree
no, no,
with you,
I'm not
but
talking about
right now,
10 years ago. I still hire people, a lot of business analysts, and a lot of organizations look up to me for them to hire business analysts. So,
I see, right,
uh,
companies are cutting costs and they want everything to be done by one person, right? So that's why I'm asking these questions when I look at
yes,
these
I
jobs.
agree, but that is only one side of the story. There are organizations who understand the importance of it, and that's the reason I'm saying if you want to have a detailed discussion on that front, you can probably do this after the course, or you can speak to the training coordinator who will be able to explain you much better.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
But I think from my research, whatever I have found till now is that there are companies are really asking for a BA to be doing all these different
I
things.
have
And I
taken
don't
session of various organizations. My last batch was of 10 people from one organization who wanted their people to understand what was the actual business analyst. They were all BAs. They were all the average years of experience was 7 years, but they were not performing their activities to the level the company wanted, and hence they sent 10 people to the training program just to learn business analyst. Average experience of 7 years, some the highest being 4 years in the same company, and they did not know what exactly a BA is and what BA does. So I will not generalize my statement by saying what I have researched on Google. I'm sorry for that, but I know where because I do a lot of trainings to a lot of organizations, and companies are spending money and they're sponsoring people to do CBA certification. And mind you, CBA certification is not a cheap certification to do. So it's not very, doesn't come in very easy. So if you want to become a member, that is $55 just to become a member. Then there's a cost for filling up the application form. That's $125. Then there's an exam cost.
Please don't get me wrong here, sir.
No, no, no. I'm
I'm
just
not
saying.
saying that CBAP is a cheap certification, but what I'm saying is from a job standpoint,
No,
from a
that's what I'm saying. See,
success
organizations
standpoint,
are paying money
more than
from their
CBAP,
own pocket to on their own pocket to make their employees certified on that front. There are
right.
organizations.
There are some companies that's fine. Yeah, go ahead. Please go ahead and
So
finish.
that's what I'm saying that it- generalizing the research based on what you look at job sites, uh, I think that would not be the putting up a clear picture. If you want to look from the perspective, it's just not a very generic term of saying BA jobs in a particular location on a Google, right? Or going to a website, only one particular website and looking at it. There are different ways, and CWeb jobs are, in fact, more than less are going through LinkedIn. They are going through IIBA's career website, and they know that they're looking for the right people, right? So the people
Well,
who know
that's true,
about
but
this thing,
CBAP also, so sorry to interrupt you. I just want to quickly mention this point. You're right, CBAP jobs are there, but at the
hmm,
same time, for entry-level person, so
hmm,
like myself, who does not have any experience,
hmm.
I don't think we can get a CBAP. Even to get CBAP, you should have some
You
prior
won't get
experience
CWeb
as a
unless
business
until you
analyst.
have 5 years of experience. You cannot get a certification. No, you can't.
I'm sorry?
You cannot take CBAP certification exam unless until you have 5 years of experience. For CCBA, it's 3 years.
Exactly. So you should
Right.
have some BA experience, and then
For the
whatever you said
certification,
about the company, yes,
for
that's
the
fine.
certification,
But
yes.
so that's why I was asking, is this course here to help me get a job, or is it just focusing more towards getting the CBAP certification? That is
It's
why I asked you
and that's
earlier
the reason
also.
I'm saying, Ranjeet. The course is basically to explain you what is a business analyst, who is a business analyst, what does a business analyst do, what is business analysis, why is this role important, and what are the activities which are performed within this role. So it is not targeting any specific certification. It is not for CBAP certification. It is not for CCBA certification. It is for you to understand what is a business analyst. And as you mentioned that since you are for a fresher or to start into a role, first things first is to understand what that role is. So if I take a mock interview right now, if I have to take a mock interview for, if you apply for a BA role, if I take a mock interview and if I start talking about elicitation techniques, if I start talking about requirements gathering ways and then how would you handle a difficult stakeholder, and if you're not able to explain to me or convince me, then I cannot give you that job. So this training program will talk about what is required, what are the tools and techniques required for the from the perspective of from a BA role perspective.
Right. So mostly it's conceptual subject only, not necessarily from a practical or a hands-on approach.
We will do hands-on. So see, that's a this is the thing, Ranjit. So when as business analyst, when I say one of the critical activities you'll be doing will be writing requirements documentation. Okay. So when we talk about hands-on, I will give you an assignment to write a requirements documentation. Now that requirements documentation would happen in a Microsoft Word, and this is how 99% times it works in the industry. So what additional tool would you want me to explain in that?
I
And
also spoke to some of my other friends
uh,
who actually suggested me to go with BA career, and that's why I've
uh,
been exploring this.
uh,
And then one of the things that they say is, look, a lot of people will say that, yeah, the concept is important, elicitation technique or gathering techniques,
uh,
that's fine. But the actual work, I don't think when you actually are working in an organization, you cannot just sit there and talk about theory. You need to be able to use some tools. You need to create the documents and create
so
actual
exactly right.
templates.
So when you said creating the document, that is what we'll do as part of the assignment. So I'm not just gonna give you and tell
But to
you this
create
is
the sorry, one second.
uh,
So create the document itself, you need to have a combination of the technology knowledge versus
we will talk
human
about what
knowledge.
you need. But see, it will depend on the content of the document. So when I'm talking about as is and to be process, how you document the content. So if I'll give you a use case or if I give you a problem statement that you write a requirement specification document for an application which is gonna help a customer open a current account in a bank. Let's just say, for example, I'm taking that example, right? So what all you need to cover? What is the rate section? Risk assumption issues and dependencies. What is the as is process? What is the to be process? How do you document? What is the scope? how you document in scope and out of scope. This is the actual content of a requirement specification document. So within this,
But
you
it
don't need
also contains some technical information, right? It will
no,
talk
so
about other
technical
technical
terms,
aspects also.
yes. So it depends upon what kind of document. That is called an HLD. That is a high-level design document we're talking about, and that is not a BA's role's responsibility. It's a designer's or a developer responsibility to write actual how the code will be designed. Is called an HLD or a LLD, which is
No,
high-level
not the
design document.
design. No, not the design. But what about the SRS, like, requirement specification
So
or
SRS
functional
also does
specification?
not need to you for you to understand the detailed code and detailed application. What it needs, and we talked about in a slide about talking about, understanding the organization and understanding the current systems, and that is more required. More of that is required in writing those documents. See, Ranjit, I would love to take these questions. Can we take this for the end of the session because I'm getting pings from people who are saying that can we move further?
Oh yeah, sorry, I thought this was almost the end. That's why I have
No, no, it's
started
not
asking
the
questions.
end. We are just at
Accept
the
my
one
apology.
third of it. So,
Please accept my apologies. Sorry about that.
all right. Right. Sunil, we are moving on. So, right. We talked about a lot about business analysts. So, I hope that would have helped a lot of people to understand what is the BA role and responsibility, what is the expectation out of a business analyst. So, we talked about a project manager. We talked about a business analyst. I'm not going to go into the definitions of project manager and business analyst. I'm taking the amount of discussion which we had previously. Everybody is aware and good enough with the definitions, right? Any questions on the who's a project manager and who's a business analyst? No? I'll just give you a high level. A project manager is a person who is responsible for the delivery of the project. A business analyst would be uh, most often than not would be the right hand man of a project manager who would be helping project manager in delivering a lot of things. But yes, the ownership of various activities would differ. A business analyst, when writing a requirements documentation, the ownership would lie with the business analyst, but the end-to-end responsibility of the delivery would be project manager. Okay. This is something which I tell a lot of people in a lot of my other sessions. As a business analyst, the job of the business analyst, you should look at as a, the top advisor of a project manager. So business analyst cannot take a decision on its own. A business analyst job is to have enough information around any particular topic so as to help the decision making person. It could be a project manager, it could be your a stakeholder, specifically the sponsor, the person who's paying money to do the project, for them to make an informed decision. So if you see a problem as a business analyst, the job is to basically analyze the problem. Within a project we have seen you're going in a particular way and you realize that if we continue the project in this direction, this might lead to something going wrong. So you cannot take a decision to stop the project at that point of time. So as a business analyst, the job of a business analyst to gather the information, analyze it to the level you can, make sure the supporting documents are there, and take it to the right person, in this case the project manager, who would then take a decision whether to go or not to go. Alright? Okay. So what we defined, what we discussed, PM is basically ultimately responsible for the objectives of project, that is the delivery of the project ultimately lies with the project manager. A business analyst is responsible for ensuring the project output meets the requirements of the business and the stakeholders who have given the requirements. Okay. Any questions, guys, on the role of BA and a PM? All right. So this is basically, if you look at the knowledge areas from the perspective of a business analyst and a project manager. Now this is from the certification. So from PM you have PMP, from PMI for BA. The knowledge area which you're seeing is from IIBA. Don't go by the terminology when I say IIBA. That means IIBA has defined how BA business analysts work. If you basically look at the areas which we are highlighting from a BA role and perspective, this is something which every BA does. Okay, it's just a very generic way they have clubbed the activities which a business analyst performs into various buckets. So if you are gathering requirements, it has been requirement elicitation. If you are documenting and analyzing the requirements, it has been clubbed under requirement analysis and documentation bucket. Communicating requirements either to the stakeholder for approval or for the further activity as in the development of those requirements and the requirements communication. So these are just the knowledge areas. Any and every activity which a business analyst does can be tagged into any of this knowledge area. It will actually go into one of this knowledge area. Any questions on the knowledge areas, guys? Don't worry, we'll be covering most of them in detail in our further sessions. Okay. Okay. Moving on, we're talking about the skill set comparison. So when talk about skill set comparison, the business analyst, project manager both need to have a very strong, very strong communication skill, understanding of the SDLC, negotiation, and the conscious building within the stakeholders. This is one of the very critical skill set which you need when you have difficult stakeholders and people who are not very conducive of change, who are supportive of change, and strong interpersonal and client management skills. So these are the way utmost or very important skill set if you want to be a project manager or if you want to be a business analyst, something which you would really need to have to be a successful business analyst or project manager. All right. Any questions, guys? Anybody who disagrees that these are not the things which you need as a business analyst? All right. Okay. So moving on to the differences between a project manager and business analyst, we've already talked a lot about the skill set, but this is more on the, we talked about the role, but this is more on the skill set. So a project manager is basically, as I mentioned, is the person responsible for end-to-end projects. So the person needs to have a look at the bigger picture, where the business analyst has to be very detailed oriented. So when you're working on a particular area, you need to be very strong in that area. How that area or that particular piece fits into the whole puzzle is the job of the project manager. Okay. Project manager directs the project team. Business analyst would be listening to more of SMEs and the stakeholders from the implementation side. Basically, anything which can impact a delivery of a requirement, and any person who has that information or a person who is responsible for delivering of a requirement is something a business analyst will always be in close touch with. And that is the reason when I say business analyst is basically project manager's right hand man. Is the top advisor of project manager, because a business analyst is so closely involved with the requirements, and project manager is always looking at a higher picture. Okay. Uh, The other areas, if you look at help SMEs describe how that is requirement elicitation and defining the requirements clearly, ensures the product is built right according to the requirements. Again, it's a standard thing. Identify business issues, manage requirements change request, perform requirements related tasks in the WBS. Yes, okay, I will come back here and define that. Possess investigative skills. Right, so I'm going to only talk about the differences and the skill set from the business analyst perspective, as this is a BA role. So anybody who knows what is the WBS? What do we mean by perform requirements related task in the WBS? Everybody knows
Yes, it
WBS?
is a work breakdown structure.
Correct. So it is very important for a business analyst, and this will happen from a project manager level as well. So a project manager would break down a big chunk of project into multiple. It could be phases, releases. Within a release, it could break down into multiple tasks. So I could say module 1, requirement gathering session, module 2, requirement gathering session, right? So the requirement gathering and the related tasks are need to be based on the work breakdown structure. So how you break down the work to a manageable size of work, a manageable piece of chunk, and work according to that. So as a business analyst, you might work into, if I give you 10 modules and tell you to do requirement analysis within a day, you'll not be able to, correct? What else? What do you understand by manager manages the requirements change request? What is a change request? So we have mentioned something in business analyst manages requirements change request. Anybody? Change request?
Can you repeat your question again?
So what do we mean by managing change request? What does a business analyst do in that front?
So suppose if there is a change in the requirements, then the BA will have to handle that, right?
Correct.
How do you handle that? Can you just incorporate it as it is, or should you just run it by some people, or do some things around that?
All right. So exactly. So when we talk about change requests, we'll talk in detail as well as the business analyst activities. But what we need to keep in mind is there are different phases of requirements as well. So you gather requirement, you analyze requirements, and you get requirements signed off by the stakeholder, the person who's given the requirements, right? So once you have gathered the requirements during the analysis, change can happen to the requirements, right? Stakeholder is still discussing the requirements with you, realizes that something else is required, so the person can add more requirements to. Whereas a change could come due to any reason after the requirements have been signed off. It could be the requirements are signed off, we started working on it, and it's a regulatory requirement. The regulatory body has changed the requirement now, so you have to change the way you work. So how would you manage the change request is also something which BA closely monitors and works on. Okay. Uh,
So the
any
BA,
yes,
I just think so the BA gathers the requirements, right?
yes,
So if there is a change in business need, then the BA will change the requirement. Is it what does it mean?
yes. That's
What
one.
it means?
Yes, that's one side of it. Yes.
So the change in business needs will
Hmm.
bring change in the requirements.
Yes.
Okay.
That is one way to look at it. That's one of the reasons why there could be a change request. More often than not, the reason why we get change requests is because somebody forgot to mention some requirements which they wanted, or a wrong requirement was sent, or a conflicting requirement was sent. So when we're talking about work breakdown structures, you took a requirement on module one, and I need to understand as a business analyst why this role is important, and why organization has started realizing that it's a separate skill set and a separate role, is because of one of these reasons. When you're working on a large project, you have different departments working, and you might be working on a solution which impacts department 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I'm just giving an example here. You go to department 1, you take the requirements. Now, what department 1 will do is they will try to give you everything, and they'll say that everything is important for me, right? So we'll talk about, and as a BA, you do discuss and you do a prioritization of requirements also. They'll say, I need all these 5 requirements, and all these 5 are priority 1. Okay, then you go to department 2, they say the same thing. I have 7 requirements and all 7 are priority 1 for me. Now let's just say as a business analyst, a project manager asks you, I can only deliver 5. Which 5 should I deliver? Right? So this is where you will perform a lot of analysis and you'll suggest project manager and will speak to stakeholders mentioning that I understand that you're giving me 5 requirements as a priority 1, but I also have 7 requirements in department 2, and I feel their 3 requirements out of the 7 has higher priority because of XYZ reason. Okay. So that is one area you'll do. What will happen is department 1 will give you a requirement. That's the second case I'm giving you, which will contradict with the requirement of department 2. So in this case, what will happen? So you have taken 2 different requirements. They are contradicting with each other. So in this case, you will get the conflicting requirement resolved by having a joint meeting with both the departments. So one of them requirements will change. So that change request can happen through that process as well. But as I mentioned, more often than not, it is more likely that it goes into test. There's a defect which is raised and somebody says, well, that was missed in requirements, so it will be a change request. Or at times the stakeholders and the end users come up with the late requirements during the project software development lifecycle, in which case you will need a change request. Is that clear? Okay. Uh, any further questions? All right. So that's one of the sayings which is there in the AI. The best way to guarantee success of any type of project is to have a strong experienced project manager and a strong experienced business analyst. And a lot of organizations you'll have a project manager and business analyst played by the same person. It works in a smaller set of scheme of things for a light project, or you can say easy small project, it might work. But for a complex project which involves multiple stakeholders, multiple divisions, uh, which is a huge project involving a lot of money, then you need a strong project manager and a strong business analyst to work hand in hand to deliver it. Okay, so we're gonna move into SDLC phase of it. So far, anybody has any questions on project manager or a BA perspective? Any questions? I've intentionally stopped the screen sharing just to give you guys, I'll give a minute for everybody to rethink what we have gone through so far from the business analyst and the project manager perspective. Is there any question? Take 30 seconds, 60 seconds if you want. I will wait for a minute and then we'll continue the session.
Hi, this is Sequita. I just have a quick question. How much longer will this session be?
We got some more slides to cover, so if there are no questions, I can continue with them. I'm expecting another half an hour or so to cover the rest of the
Okay,
slides.
thank you.
Yeah. Right. So if there are no questions, I'll continue with the presentation in that case.
So will you share this slide after every class with the students?
There is a knowledge area in which these things are shared, which will be shared with you from the training coordinator. So I will share where it is available. If you look at the links which are there within the, okay, let me just quickly show it to you. So there is a knowledge base for which you can go and you can actually see everything. And if you need anything else, you will need to speak to the training coordinator. The person will share that with you. So this is the knowledge base which I'll cover. Wendy, the recorded videos as well will be shared by the training coordinator. You can share your details with us and we can share that later. Okay. So this is where every day specific things which we cover, you can actually go into it and you can have a look at it. If you need anything else, you can get in touch with the training coordinator and the person will share that with you. Okay. Sorry. Right. So now coming to the SDLC part of it. So this is basically what we'll be covering is the software development lifecycle. Uh, I think something which everybody will be aware of. It's nothing but basically how a software development happens, and where all you really see a business analyst playing a role within this software development lifecycle. So we talked about, and Ranjit was asking about the testing concept, when is the requirement gathering happens, how the design happens, how the development happens, how the testing happens, and how do you make sure that all the requirements which were ours have been delivered and meet the business need. Okay, so that is basically the SDLC, also known as the software development lifecycle. So it's just a framework which will define the phases, the milestone, the deliverables, and how a software will be. So when you talk about the evaluation criteria, this is once the system or the solution, I would say solution or system, is implemented for a business need, the system or the solution needs to be evaluated that does it meet the business need. When they started, you had a goal in mind. So is the solution meeting all the areas which you had in mind? Okay. Any questions on SDLC from anyone? Any questions? Okay. It's basically different phases, so we will be covering different areas. So if you look at the SDLC project, this is the development process, the order in the sense you have defined the project scope, which is the initiation and the analysis and the planning of the project. Then is the specified features and the baseline system, that is the requirement specification and the design of the solution. Then is the actual building of the product, which will be the development and the testing, and then deliver product to the customer, which will be the delivery and support area. So this is the overall SDLC process, the software development lifecycle of any development process. Okay. Any questions, guys, on any area of SDLC or on this diagram? Okay. So, during the SDLC process, we saw, I'm going to go back to the defined project scope, which talks about the initiations and the analysis planning, and then the requirement specification. So, you will understand from the business analyst perspective, the first and foremost major important part is to gather and understand requirement. Why are we doing this? What is that we need to do, and how this helps, right? So, everybody agrees with that? That would be the most important thing. Yeah. Okay. So when we talk about from the delivery perspective of the requirement analysis, what we look at is the elicitation, validation, specification, and verification, right? So elicitation is the gathering, actual way of going and eliciting requirements from the stakeholders or the end users. Validating those requirements, that is a sign-off process that what you have taken from the stakeholders, from the end users, are the right and what is required. The specification, that is the detailing of the requirement, and then the verification is the actual testing of the requirements when it becomes a solution. Okay, so that's the difference between validation and verification. Uh, a business analyst will also be will actually playing a role in basically creating the cost benefit analysis documentation, that is juice worth the squeeze, in other words. So you have a problem statement and you have multiple possible options, and this is where a lot of people from the industry perspective as well is a standard norm. Not doing anything is also an option. So let's just say there's an area of opportunity and I'm thinking of creating a particular solution. Let's just say I have a manufacturing plant and I don't sell anything in the UK, and I'm thinking let's do one thing, let's start selling my product in the UK. So that's a thought, that's an area of opportunity from which I will start my BA activity. But during my activity, I realized that I need 5 different licenses. I cannot ship my stuff. Half the things I will have to procure locally, and probably my product price is going to be too high for the market for me to compete in the market, right? So my analysis would say and would refer to saying the cost benefit analysis is not there. So doing nothing or basically dropping this idea is the actual option which you should be taking it, right? Which this will all be documented. This all will help from the IT system. If you think about, you do feasibility report that how feasible the solution is, and all this becomes the reason between your business case. So a business case is nothing but which defines the problem statement, the different options for every option. What is the benefit of doing this or picking this option? And then at the end, as a business analyst, what we do is we give a recommendation on a particular option. A business analyst never ever takes a decision. A business analyst will always recommend that what is the best possible solution out of it, and the concerned team or the person will be taking a decision. Okay. The deliverables during the requirement analysis phase would be functional specification document. Now I'll come back to the wordings of this: SRS, user requirement document, use case specification, addendum. Now don't go only by the names which are there in the presentation. A lot of organizations have their own naming convention. So I will rather explain you what it contains, excuse me, so you can understand what is that it captures. So when you talk about functional specification document or software specification document, a company could actually say as a FSD only, or they can say analysis document. A lot of organizations use this word like analysis document. A lot of people at a lot of organizations at the initial requirements documentation call it as a BRD, which is business requirements document. Okay, so what it contains is one of the documents will have your raw requirements which you get from your stakeholders, right? So that is one requirement documentation. Once you analyze that document, and when you put a lot of detail by speaking to the stakeholder and by after analyzing the systems, the people, the current problem, the additional details which you add becomes the functional specification document, or a detailed analysis document, or an analysis document. Okay, and a use case specification is not a separate documentation. Sometimes this is clubbed within the functional specification document. A use case is nothing but a different way of communicating the requirements to the concerned department. In fact, I think I should be taking that out. And addendum is nothing but addendum is a section which would list all the additional knowledge areas or the books. So if you look at an article, you'll see an addendum saying the knowledge referral material, any other supporting document which would help somebody who's reading this document to gather what you're trying to say. Okay. Any questions on the documentation, guys? This is very important. So if you have any questions, please ask them right now. Come on, guys. No questions? Everybody's clear on what the documentations we do? How we do it? Okay. Moving to the next slide. The role of BA in requirement analysis. Anybody would want to take that? I've intentionally gone back to previous slide. Now we have talked a lot about BA's role in requirement analysis. Nobody? Okay. So the first thing we talked about is what? Elicitation of requirements. So when you say elicitation is basically requirement gathering, how do we do requirement gathering? We do it via workshop facilitation, interviews, observation, research. Anybody has any experience of any requirement gathering and would want to talk about it, share their experience? You know, we will learn more if we talk about these things. So anybody want to share their experience? No? Okay. So I'll just give you a brief about what the gathering techniques are and how and when they are required and when they're used. So when you talk about workshop facilitation, it's basically when you get group of people in the room, and as a business analyst you try to take a requirement from a group of people. So this is a workshop which will have uh, more number of people, but all of them will be have some interest in the requirement area which you're documenting at the point of time. It's not a brainstorming session in which you will get any number of people and the people will be talking about the different solutions they can think of. So this is a focus group. This is people who have interest in that area of development or area of analysis which you're doing, and hence you will get those people into a room to have a workshop with multiple people to understand their needs and their requirements, or probably to explain what is the problem statement or what are you doing about it. Interview is basically one-on-one. This is when you have a stakeholder, you talk to a person face to face, not face to face, but in any medium, but one-to-one discussion with the person and asking them questions as to what they need, what is the problem area they have, what are the challenges they are facing. During interviews, you can have either open-ended or closed-ended questions. Closed-ended questions are the ones which you ask as a yes/no question. Open-ended questions are in which you are actually expecting a response. Okay. Interviews could be formal or informal again, depending upon how you're conducting those. Observation is where you don't ask questions to people, you just sit and observe what people are doing. So this is generally commonly used because a lot of people could be busy and they might not have time to dedicate specifically for the requirements. So what you do is you become part of that team, you observe somebody doing their activity and then just make notes as to what they're doing. What do you think is the problem areas and what do you think can be improved to improve efficiency or production or whatever you want to look at. Research is basically researching on the current system, reading the existing documentation on a particular process or a methodology, uh, going to third-party research, as in looking at what is happening within the industry, how things have improved over the years in a particular area. The benchmarking we do, and the organizations do for the salaries is something which is a research, is a third party. So third-party organization will take data from a lot of organizations and produce a report with saying that what is the benchmark salary for a particular area, for a particular experienced guy in a particular role. So this could be a research which you could do to gather requirements. Any questions on requirements gathering? Now questions. If you have to pick one, which one will you pick? Anybody would want to answer the question? So if you have right now 1, 2, 3, 4 ways of gathering requirements, would you know which one to pick when, or would you take a random shot at it? No one. So you basically need to understand that every
I think
requirement.
workshop facilitation.
Okay. So and why and when would you do that?
Uh, See, I think these are not silo activities. So
Mhm.
first you need to do your research, and then you need to be able to observe, and then conduct workshop facilitation. Because unless you research and observe, you don't know what the as-is situation is, right? What the current situation is, as you said earlier.
That's one
And
way of
then,
looking at it. Could be using more than one requirement gathering approach based on your need, but it could be that you already are aware of the problem statement, you're already aware of the organization structure, so you might straight away go for workshop facilitation. But a very well said point, and this is what I wanted somebody to come up with, that there's no hard and fast rule that you have to use only one. You could do your research, observe something, and then go interview something on a particular process to understand what is the problem area and what is the way solution should work. Okay, very well said, Ranjit. This is the point which I wanted to make across, that there is no hard and fast rule that you have to pick only one. You can pick multiple, whatever works, whatever at the end of the day gets you the requirement is the right way. Okay. But you also need to understand the positives and negatives, because to conduct an interview, probably if you are speaking to a very, very senior person, let's just say a sponsor, probably interview might take some time, because the person, you have to first find the time from that person to do the interview. Observation is very challenging because a lot of people behave differently when they know that they're being observed. And this is coming from my personal experience. So I was actually put into a team to observe them, and since they knew that people behave differently, I was put as a person saying that I'm going to be joining that team, so I have to be trained on that area, and my job was to basically observe what they're doing and to find out what are the problem areas, because the team was really busy. So everything has their own pros and cons. So judging on the kind of project you're working on, the kind of stakeholders you have, probably you'll have to pick which one works for you. And if the multiple areas you have to use, then use them. There's nobody stopping you. Okay. Any questions, guys, on the gathering front? Very important. No? All right. The second point is on the requirements documentation. So when we talk about documenting requirements, as I said, that you might get a sort of a raw requirement. Now it could be in an Excel, it could be just an email from a stakeholder saying that I need this. So either it could be a informal requirement, a raw requirement which you're getting from stakeholder, or it could be a set of requirements you're getting from a department in an Excel. Again, it could be in a raw form, which will be your business requirement document. Once you get the requirement, you do the analysis, you create the other functional specification documents or a detailed documentation. Uh, there are two more documents which they are talking about. One is the requirements traceability matrix, or it's also known as, mentioning as requirements traceable document, but it's also known as RTM, requirements traceability matrix, and non-functional requirements document. So anybody would want to explain me what is the requirement traceability matrix is? This is one of the most important document a BA would ever produce in his whole life. It's also known as the RTM, requirements traceability matrix. Anybody, what do you think uh, is meant by requirements traceability matrix? Nobody?
I think just from the name itself, it says that you're trying to trace something back, right?
Correct. So you want to explain a little bit? You're on the right track. Trace something back to what?
Trace, I think, requirements.
Right. So that's absolutely right. So requirements traceability, what it does is does two kind of traceability. It does the forward traceability, it does the backward traceability. So now coming back to again to the front, what Ranjit was saying, that tools, there are tools which actually does requirement traceability. So when you talked about Rational Requisite Pro, um, a rational tool can do traceability metrics very well within the tool and can maintain the documentation on a server, on a common server. But the traceability can also be done in an Excel. what in a nutshell it does is, once a requirement is gathered, to make sure no requirement is ever missed, it will have multiple sections. So once the requirement moves from requirement gathering phase to design phase, imagine it as an Excel sheet having multiple columns. So design team will actually go and say that, yes, I look at the requirement, I see this requirement, and this is what I've done. Then the development team will come and say in the same Excel, saying in their column that, yes, I've seen this requirement, I've seen the design document, and this is how I've done coding, or this is what I've done to develop this requirement. Then the testing team will come and say, when their job is done, that yes, I have seen this requirement has been developed, and this is what I have done to test it. Okay. And then there will finally be the implementation team saying that, yes, I see this requirement have been developed, tested, and this is going to be implemented in drop 1.0 or release 1.0 to be implemented on XYZ date. So this is forward traceability, making sure that once a requirement is gathered, it is delivered, it is goes through the complete SDLC life cycle. The reason why I say this is a very important document for a business analyst, because I've seen, and it's happened in my personal experience, when we were not doing the RTM, the requirements were missed. So I gathered the requirement from business, I sent it to the development team, but since there was nobody checking that, if you're working with 50, 100 requirements, you cannot remember all the requirements by heart, right? So it happened that the development team forgot one requirement. Testing team didn't know because there was no code for that requirement. So they didn't test it. And once the product went live and the user used it, and it said like, where is that ability for that customer to open an account? It wasn't there because we missed that requirement. So requirement traceability makes sure that if you have a requirement, a signed off requirement, it will go through the SDLC lifecycle to the end, which is the implementation. So now that is forward traceability. Traceability also does it, and most of the organizations do not use this. I've seen only very few use this. It also does a backward traceability, which is a requirement has to backtrack to a business case. It's a very simple logic. If there is a requirement which does not help in delivering the business case, then that is not a requirement. That is not a need of the project. So a requirement has to backtrack and solve a part of a puzzle of a business case or a business need. If a requirement does not help in deliver business need, it's not a valid requirement. Okay. Any questions on that? Is that clear? Backward traceability clear to everybody? Okay. Just to give you an idea, there are organizations who have taken RTM to a level of strictness that if the requirement is not in RTM, they cannot bill the client for that anything outside RTM. So if the service industry or the person who's delivering the solution, they need to be billed for a requirement. That requirement has to be in RTM, signed up by a particular team. So that's how people are taking seriously. Okay. And the third point we're talking about, this is where the BA will also use their modeling skills to document business requirements. So, Ranjit, probably this is the area which will cover those some of the points you were talking about at a higher level. I will not cover them in detail level. But when we talk about modeling not from the fashion perspective, but it is basically how do you showcase a particular requirement. So, when you go to a particular, I don't know, architect's office, you will see a model of a building. The building is still under construction, but you can see, okay, this is how my building will look like. So modeling is the same way we use within the BA skill set to depict a requirement in a different format other than text. So it could be in a business flow, which is nothing but a flow chart, which has a start, what we used to do to define a business flow. So it's a start, it'll go to a process. If it's a decision, yes, no. So that is one way of modeling a requirement or a business flow. Other could be a prototype or a screen mockup, right? So if I'm building an application, rather than just writing that the screen would be 8 by 10 inches, there would be a field with the name this and accept this. What I can do is I can draw a mock-up of a screen. I can draw boxes and say, this is how your screen look like. The top left section would have a logo. These are the number of fields which will be there. This is where the data will be entered, and the person could actually see a screen mock-up, something which a model of a screen, actual screen. So these are called modeling skills. So there are various techniques. We will discuss them in detail. The class diagram, the sequence diagram, wireframe mesh, prototype. All these are different modeling techniques which you can use. Again, Which one will you use will depend upon the kind of requirements you have, will depend on the kind of project you have, the complexity of your project. Sometimes a business flow is something which is very, very important for people, because if it's a very lengthy business process with multiple decisions in between, if I write text, it'll be very, very hard for me to explain it to the people. So a business process might help in that case. So you have to take a call. What will help? Again, going back to the requirements gathering way, when I said that, it is no hard and fast that you have to use only one. You can use multiple, same goes here. You can use multiple modeling techniques within your documentation to explain the requirements. And Ranjit, this will probably, I'm not sure if this clears some of the doubts there. When you're writing a function specification document, we'll have combination of text plus modeling technique. Okay, or probably a link to, so I would say in a text, in a paragraph, I would define how my business process will work, and then I will follow it with a flowchart for the person to understand it in detail. Okay, but again, as I said, that there's no hard and fast rule. Different organizations have different templates, and based on what you're doing, it will change how you will use these modeling techniques. Okay. Uh, any question on the modeling requirements? No questions? All right. The next point is the requirements validation and prioritization activities. As I mentioned, first is the validation. That is, once you gather the requirements and you have done your analysis, you have done a modeling of the requirement, you have created a flowchart, and then you have put everything clubbed into a function specific documentation, for example, or an analysis documentation. What we need to do is we need to get it validated that what we have documented and what we have understood from the requirements from the gathering workshop or the interview or the analysis that you have done is correct. So this is where the validation step comes in. This is where the requirements goes back to the stakeholder who has given the requirements, and this sign off on it that yes, the understanding of the business analyst is right as per the stakeholder needs. This is a very, very important step, because earlier, as I mentioned, the business analyst role was not there. This step was not happening. So a stakeholder used to give the requirements. The person used to think that I've understood and will start developing it. And then somewhere down the line, they will say that, this is not what I said. I said something else and I wanted something else, and the developer has done something else, right? And hence this validation step has become very, very important in today's world. With the validation bit, we also do is the prioritization activities. We will discuss these prioritization activities in the further session later on in detail. This is to say, if you have 20 requirements coming from a stakeholder, this 20, which is the most important and how would you rank them? Okay, so ranking could happen based on multiple models. Just to give you a brief, there is Moscow, which is must have, should have, could have, won't have. You can prioritize based on the complexity. You can prioritize based on the business benefit. We will talk about different prioritization activities, but primarily the prioritization activities is is led by business analyst, but the prioritization has to come from a business need and justification from the stakeholder who has given the requirements. Okay. Any questions from anyone? Everybody is clear on the validation front and the prioritization activities perspective? Okay. The other role of BA in the requirement analysis is the stakeholder engagement. Self-explanatory. Any activity when you do, you're basically engaging a stakeholder, where be it requirement gathering, be it validation, be it prioritization. You have to engage your stakeholders. When to engage, which stakeholder, who is responsible for what area. This is very important to understand. Again, we will cover that in detail in the stakeholder mapping. What it is, how do you identify which stakeholder goes where, when do you identify which stakeholder, and when do you get in touch with the stakeholder. Okay. So when you talk about requirements validation, whom you need to talk to, whom you need to just inform, which are the stakeholders which you just need to inform that this is happening, who is responsible, who is accountable. All this is done in the stakeholder engagement map, which we'll discuss in our future sessions. So any questions, guys, on any of these points? Okay.
So one quick question. Do you have any real documents that you can share with us?
So I cannot share the actual documents which we have done, but yes, we have templates, and we will be doing the the assignments on those documents, and I will be reviewing them. So I can tell you which areas you have missed, what you have not included, what you have included. And don't worry, I will not just give you a random example. We'll take different examples and we'll try to do different examples for everybody. So I'll not give only one assignment for everybody. So I can give like one assignment to 2 to 3 people, then they will cover that topic, and then different assignment to different people. We can take care of that. But I cannot share because every documentation which we have done or which I have done is for a specific organization, and they all have NDA assigned. So I don't even have them on my personal PC, to be honest. Okay, but there are various templates, used. And it's when you see the template, you'll understand what we need to fill, and you'll be okay with it. Trust me. All right. Anybody else? Any questions? All right. Moving on, so we are talking about the SDLC phase. So the next after the requirement is the design phase. This is where a BA might not be exactly involved. This is how requirements will be designed. Okay, it could be screen layouts to how the process will work, how the tables will work, which table will be created where, if I talk about from the technical perspective. So this will be the design of the requirements, including the technical design specification. Now, a BA might not be responsible or accountable to create a technical design specification, but do you think, now this is a question for all you guys, do you think a BA would be involved during these phases when somebody is writing a technical design specification? Anybody? Yes, from Wendy. Anybody else? Let me see what that is. Anybody would want to give an answer to that question? Okay. So yes, a BA might not be when essentially they should be documenting. A BA's documenting work has been over when the comments documentation and the analysis documentations are signed off. But yes, when you talk about design documents and technical design specification, a BA might not be responsible to create that document, but a BA would be involved because a BA is the only person who is the closest to the requirement. Okay, so if they have any query, so design team, development team, or testing team, if they have any queries on the requirements, they will be turning back to the business analyst. Now, business analyst, well, since the business analyst is the next best person than the stakeholder who has given the requirements to answer this question. So a BA would be involved in all the phases. We might not be creating the document, we might not be responsible for the output, but we will be involved in that process because without the business analyst, it'll be basically tough for the people to come up with the right documentation. Plus, again, as I mentioned, requirement traceability matrix is something which a BA does. So I would need to know that design team has done their job and updated the RTM as well. Okay. So it defines role of a BA, review the solution documents, work closely with the solution designer and architects to ensure the requirements are clear, as we talked about. Keep the stakeholder engaged to reassure them that the requirements are being implemented. Manage the changes of to requirements both from the business and from the solution designer's point of view. Now, if you look at the last point, uh, when the design team or the development team asks a lot of questions, it could be that the questions which they are asking from the solution perspective or from the design perspective might raise certain questions which make you go back and change your requirements. Okay, so they might need a certain change in certain areas, or certain requirements might become invalidated because the current structure of the design is such that they cannot be implemented. So all this will come back from the design and development phase, which a BA needs to incorporate in the documentation and make sure stakeholders are aware of it. Also, the last point says it's a great time to actively start using the RTM, which is requirements traceability matrix, which we just discussed. Any questions, guys? No? Everybody is clear of the role? All right. Moving on to the development phase, this is the actual development. If you're talking about IT, this is where the developers will be writing the pieces of code, compiling them and creating the solution. So this is something which a BA would be again from the perspective of managing the queries which are coming from the development team. If there's anything which comes up in a way that which need a change in requirement, then raising a change request, making sure the stakeholders are aware. Again, the same thing, and again making sure the RTM is updated. Okay. So this is again, which is the definition of the role of BA. The business analyst role is lighter during this phase. In the small team, it's going to happen that the BA is asked to clarify requirements, uh, or in agile projects, the BA will be asked to review the prototypes. You know, it could be asked to review or sign up on a documentation, making sure that people understand the requirements are clear. And the BA would anyways would be part of every phase to clarify requirements. Okay. Any questions, guys? Okay. Moving on. Then the testing phase. I think Ranjit, you were asking the question on the testing concepts as well. Again, this is a high level part. We will be covering testing phases in detail later on. And I can always, I'm ISTQB certified tester as well. So if anybody wants to have a detailed testing discussion on the testing area, I can do that as well. Probably not as part of the session, but a separate session, but we can do that as well. So in testing phase basically is to demonstrate that the requirements which is gathered by the BA, designed by the design team and developed by the developers is actually working as per the requirement. Okay, so it's not that I asked for a field to capture the name and the field is capturing a phone number. Okay, so this is basically testing will govern and validate that all the requirements which are gathered are actually working as per the need within the solution. Within the testing phase, you will have test strategy should be actually on the top. You have test strategy, test plan, test scripts, and test cases. Uh, Everybody is aware about these terminologies. Do you want me to cover in detail? This question you need to answer. Do you want me to cover in detail? Everybody is aware of testing terminologies. Sanjeev? All right. For the interest of the training program, what I'll do is I'll give you a brief about everything. So a test strategy is nothing but a documentation which defines what is the strategy or what is the way the project is going to go about testing the requirements. Okay, a test strategy basically defines various test phases you will have. So if you talk about testing, you have application testing, you have integration testing, you have performance testing, you have security testing. If you look at the different types of testing, there was a time when I actually wrote down 22 types of testing alone for a particular project. So testing strategies defines what are the different testing we will do, uh, how that will be happening, and how we'll go about in that front. Just a second, guys. I've got a question on the chat. So Wendy is asking the question. So we will be writing test code along with the QA team, or only working with QA to help instruct for next testing. Wendy, basically the role definition of a BA is that you will not write any of the test cases. So as a business analyst, since we are the people who are very close to the requirements, yes, we can review their test plans, we can review their test cases, we can help them in writing testing scripts, but we will not write test scripts. Okay. So post test script comes the test plan. Test plan is how we will conduct our testing activities for every phase. So if I have an application testing, integration testing, let's just say I'm only doing those two testing in my solution. I will write a test plan for application testing. I will write a test plan for integration testing. Again, when we talk about this documentation, this talks about what is the scope, what is out of scope, what will be tested, which environment will be used in testing it, what is required, what will not be tested. This is a very important section which needs to be mentioned. What we will test and what we will not test, so that there's a clarity overall. Uh, Test scripts and test cases are the actual scripts, actual step-by-step scripts which are created for the testers to go one by one and to make sure the solution is as per the requirements. Everybody clear on that one? Questions from the testing phase? No? Okay. Moving on. During the testing phase, this is the role of BA. Business analyst can assist with reviewing the test scripts, as I mentioned, to ensure that all requirements are being tested. A business analyst will also get involved in defect prioritization in some projects. So this is also known as defect triaging. So once the tester is testing a defect, they will raise a defect saying the code is not working properly, and developer might say that this is as per requirement. So a business analyst is very close to the requirements, can validate if the defect is valid or not. This generally happens when there is a conflict of ideology or the status between the development and testing team. If a tester is a defect and the developer accepts this, yes, there's a code piece which is not working as expected and accept the defect, then a BA might not be involved. Sometimes, as it mentions that a BA might be involved in some of the projects in prioritization. This is again because as a business analyst, since we are very close to the requirements, so if let's just say there are 5 defects and and we can only fix 2 of them. Let's just, for example, I'm giving a random example. Then which 2 should be fixed out of these 5? A business analyst will be the right person to guide the development team, because a business analyst is the person who was involved, the stakeholder. That's one. Two, a business holder gathered all the requirements at the closest to the requirement. And 3, and the most important one, was involved in the prioritization activities of the requirements. So if my requirement is priority 1 and I have a defect on that requirement, obviously my defect becomes priority 1 as well. Okay. Any questions? Okay. All right. Moving on to the last phase of the SDLC, which is the release and maintenance. This is when the uh, code or the solution is released for the actual stakeholders who has given the requirements. So this would include a lot of activities, as in what is required to just give me a second. What is required to implement a particular solution? This is something which is already discussed and understood in the previous stages. So when you're doing the requirement analysis, at that point of time, you will have an implementation person as also one of your stakeholders. So you'll be constantly touched with that person to understand what is required to implement the solution as well. Because your development and the design of solution has to be based on implementation. And going back to the same example, nobody discussed in that production flow that where the machine will be placed and how much area is required. The implementation guides were not included before during the requirement gathering phase, and hence that was a problem. Okay. During this phase, training manuals will be created. This is once you bring a new solution, the existing team who is using the old system, what is that they need to change in their existing system to start using the new solution. What maintenance is, we includes the post-implementation problem. This is start using it, and then you might have some bugs, some new enhancement which you need to bring in. Again, that is the maintenance part. The system once goes live is for a certain period of time is under maintenance, which is like 6 months to 1 year at least, in which you keep fixing small bits and pieces of the problem. Okay. Any questions on this release and maintenance front?